right, everybody, so I'm gonna show you how to do our watercolor practice assignment here. The things you're gonna need is you're gonna need a little cup of water, you're gonna need your watercolor tray, and you're gonna need a paper towel. Again, sorry about my birds squawking in the background. That's just part of my life here at home. So hopefully you just can tune that out like I do. Okay, what you're gonna wanna do after you have your watercolor tray, your cup of water, and your paintbrush, or paintbrush and paper towel, you wanna make sure you make 5 just kind of long rectangles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And then label this watercolor practice, and then you can put your name down at the bottom here. So, Mrs. Schmid. There we go. So I've got my name down at the bottom. In this very first row, we're gonna be doing warm colors. And in the second row, cool colors. Third row, neutral colors. Fourth row, we're gonna make rainbow. And then fifth row, you can just kind of experiment and do something choice, okay? So I'm gonna do these one at a time, okay? Try to maybe pause the video and follow along as you need, okay? I'm also gonna be giving you some tips on like what to do when you're using watercolor, how too much water can become a problem, or too little water can become a problem, and how to fix some of those issues when you have them on the paper here, okay? So I'm gonna start with warm color. So I'm gonna wet my brush, okay? And I'm gonna start with the darkest one. I'm gonna start with red, okay? So I'm just taking a little bit of water. I don't wanna fill the watercolor cake with water. We just wanna use a little bit, okay? And you can test it right over here just by tapping. It also gets off a little bit of the excess watercolor there, okay? So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start by adding my red to the end here. Okay, so pull it forward. All right, and you're gonna notice that the red is going to start to fade in intensity. That's because this is just like our first layer. If you put too much watercolor down at once, you're gonna end up with, I'll show you, a really big kind of blob, and it's gonna spread, and it looks really vibrant right now, but it takes a long time to dry when it looks like this, okay? So if you get too much watercolor on there, you can take your paper towel and just gently dab to get some of it off, okay? Because you really don't want to have too much, because then it'll just spread everywhere and be a mess. Okay, so I've started with red, okay, and while it's still wet here, I'm going to rinse off my brush, just then dry it a little bit, and then get a little more water. I'm gonna go to the next color, orange, okay? So I'm gonna get a little bit, test to see how much is on there. Then I'm going to color a little bit right on top of my red that I've been doing. Okay. Just kind of blend it in by painting a little bit on top of the red. Okay, pulling it across, get a little more orange. Okay, pull it across. And once you start to run out of paint on there, do you see what happens? It starts to kind of get dry. You get dry brush, okay? That just means you need a little more water. You can go back in and you don't even have to get more paint. You can just reactivate it, okay? Right? So, rinse off my brush, dry it a little bit. I'm gonna take a little more red and I'm going to pull it now across. Just kind of try to mix it some more into my orange. You may notice when you're doing this that it might like be overwhelming, like too much. You can always wipe off a little bit of the color onto a paper towel and then just go back in and kind of blend with a cleaner brush. Wipe off a little more, maybe grab a little bit of orange and pull some more across, just like so. Okay, and if you think that maybe the one part's too dark, you can just go in with some plain water and just kind of pull it across and lighten it up a bit. Okay. Now in this last section here, I'm gonna do yellow. So I wanna make sure my brush is really clean because yellow can be easily contaminated because it's a lighter color. So I'm getting some yellow on my brush. You don't need a lot. And I'm gonna start again by blending it kind of on top of the orange. pulling that yellow on top of my orange, and then I'm pulling it across to the end here. Need a little more water. You want to make sure also that before we start moving into the cool colors, you maybe will want to rinse out or change out your water. Okay, and I'm going to be doing that in just a second here. So I like to sometimes have 2 cups of water, just so that I'm not having to constantly go back and rinse it out. But for this sake here, I'm just going to go dump it out in my bathroom right next to me here. 1 second. All fresh water. I'll put it back over here. Okay, so I've got my warm colors, and now I want to move on to my cool colors. So I'm going to make sure my brush is nice and clean. I just want to start out with just a little bit of water. I'm going to start with my darkest color, which is purple. Okay, starting out with the purple there. Putting it at the end. And right now, I'm going to show you again what happens if we have too much water. It starts to pool up on your paper and makes it look a little messy. So remember, what do we do when we have too much? We take our paper towel, we dab. And this also works really good if you want to layer and you don't want to have to wait for it to dry, okay? You can dab it and that makes it dry pretty quickly. And then you can go back over it again with a second layer pretty quick, okay, to make it darker. All right. Now you will notice that the paper is going to start to wrinkle a little bit. That's just kind of what watercolor does to regular paper. If you want this to not happen, you need to get watercolor paper. It's thicker, it has some texture to it, a little bit deeper pores, okay. I'm going to switch now to blue, okay. And remember, with cool colors, there's kind of a rule here. You can't mix purple and green because they're actually secondary colors. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure you always put blue in between purple and green because those 2 colors do not mix. You'll get brown. Okay, so I'm noticing, I'm starting to get some dry brush, right? It's not spreading, so I'm going to grab a little water. I want to make sure before I blend in another color, I've faded it out a little bit like that. And you just do that by adding water instead of just paint directly. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to blend that into my purple a bit. I'm going to dry off my brush here, grab a little more purple. I'm going to go all the way over to the end here and then pull it on top of the blue so it blends more neatly. More smoothly. Rinse off my brush, dab it off a little bit here. And remember, if you get too much water, just use your paper towel, okay? And just gently dab it off, okay? Just like so. And you can go back in with a slightly drier paintbrush and continue to blend a little bit here. Spread the color. So we have a nice smooth blend. So I'm just going back and forth, back and forth. Okay, now grab a little more blue, just a little bit so that we have a nice smooth blend over just water. Less is more with watercolor, people. Less is more, okay? So now I'm gonna add in some green. Make sure you wash off your brush a little bit. Take some color here. Bring in the green. I always start by painting it on top of the previous color a little bit so it blends nicely. Okay. There we go. And if I want that green to be darker, I would have to wait for it to dry. Or I can take my paper towel, dab it a little bit, take off the excess water that's on there. Go back in, make sure my brush isn't too wet. You don't want too much water or it just makes a huge mess. So I'm gonna go back in, add another layer. That does help. You will want to let it dry a little bit. I like to say wait 5 minutes between layering colors. It makes it look a little neater. Okay, watercolor does dry relatively quickly, so just keep that in mind. So now we've got our warm colors and our cool colors. So neutral colors are next, and on our paint tray we have two neutral colors. We have black and we have brown, okay? So I'm gonna start with black. That's on the end here next to the red. Now with black, you can use it in a lot of different ways. You can use it to like darken another one of the cool colors or the warm colors. I like to say use brown to darken the warm colors and black to darken the cool colors, just because you get a better result that way. So if I wanted to make that purple like a darker purple, I could add a little bit of black. But remember, just a little bit, don't overdo it. Okay, right now it just looks gray, because you will, if you want a dark black, you are going to have to layer, okay? See how I look at that right away? And again, if you use too much, what do? Paper towel, okay? So I'm just gonna go in right now, dab a little bit. Never hurts to just go in and dab a bit to get some of the excess off, okay? So I'm gonna just use some water now to fade my black out a little bit. Fade it out so I can bring in the brown, okay? Brown on the other end. Okay. A little more. You can hear my dog chewing on her bone in the background. There we go. Got the brown in there. Just try to stay within the lines if you can. It's good practice for when we actually start our project, which will be the koi fish, obviously. Okay, there we go. So I've got my blend from brown to black. If I wanted this to be darker, I would go over it after it's dry, okay? So now when we're doing rainbow, we want to go in rainbow order. And lucky for you, your paint tray is already in rainbow order. We will not be using black or brown in this. We're just gonna go from red to orange to yellow to green to blue to purple. Okay, so we're gonna start with red. And I will tell you, some of you might run out of room if you don't space out your colors evenly. So there are 6 colors. What I sometimes like to do is gauge out the space here. So I'll sometimes like split it in half. I'm not gonna make marks directly on the line here because I want them to blend nicely together. Or I'm not gonna make marks right on this rectangle. So I'm gonna first kind of make a mark that's halfway, okay? And then I need to split these sections here into thirds, okay? So that's kind of hard, but just kind of make 2 lines inside and then make them on the same side there. So you end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, okay? So you can, I'll just label them for everybody here. We'll go with red, then we'll go to orange, yellow, green, blue, and then violet, or purple, whatever you want to call it. So we're gonna start with red, okay? What I like to say is just start with a little bit on the end, okay? Don't pull the red all the way into that circle. I'm gonna take off a little bit of the pigment so it's not so much. I'm gonna kind of pull the red and fade it a little so that by the time I get it to the line for the orange, it maybe isn't so solid. Now that one, I'm gonna take off some of the color. It's a lot of red there. So remember that paper towel is great for just pulling up a little bit of the pigment if it's too much, okay? Got some of the red there. Now I'm gonna just go right away into the orange. Remember, you will need to continuously use water. Don't use too much, right? But make sure you're using enough so that you can still keep your watercolor cakes wet, okay? I'm gonna dab a little so I can take off some of that water. You don't need as much. Okay, I'm gonna use just a very little bit of water now just to kind of blend these two. And I might even go back in with a little more red just to pull the orange together a bit with that red. Here we go. Blendy, blendy, blendy. And it's okay if they don't look super smooth. We're practicing, we're learning here. Okay? I don't expect any of these to be perfect by any means, because we are just learning. I've got a little too much red on my brush, so I'm gonna go in with some more orange here. All right, I'm gonna dab, and you may need more than one paper towel. I use a lot of paper towels with mine. Or I tend to, at least. All right, so I've got my orange going there. I'm gonna make sure I get up any extra water in there, because I don't want it to be too intense when I pull my yellow in. I don't want my yellow to be orange, okay? So washing off my brush completely and going into my yellow, okay? Pulling it on top of that orange. You may notice right away that when you kind of mix it in with the orange, it contaminates your brush, makes it more orange than yellow. So you're gonna wanna rinse off your brush a little bit. Go back into that yellow. Kinda get most of the square yellow here before you mix in a little more of that orange. Okay, and remember, that paper towel is your friend. You can always dab a little if too much of that orange got pulled in. Okay, you can do a little more dabbing. There we go. Pull more of that yellow across. Lovely. And I'm even gonna just smooth out that orange a little. It got a little bit. And I started to notice water pooling, creating a little bit of a watermark there. I didn't like that. So just a little more dabbing, very gentle dabbing to just get up some of the water droplets. Rinse off my brush a little bit. Okay, and I'm gonna just ever so slightly pull the yellow into the green just a little bit so that they blend nice. Okay, so I'm now rinsing off my brush, drying it off a bit, just a little bit of clean water into the green. And again, this is where you might want to switch to rinsing out your water. Mine's not too bad right now, so I'm just going to leave it for now. I'm going to blend in the green, and I'm already noticing it's pooling up a little, and I don't like that, so I'm going to grab my paper towel, dab it off. I don't want too much water. Okay, and as you go, you'll learn how much water works best and what you need to do to make sure it looks neat. Here we go. Okay. Got the green there, and I'm gonna wipe off my brush and get off as much of the green as I can before I blend, because I don't want my green to just go all the way into my yellow. Okay, I'm gonna rinse off my brush, get a little more yellow there. I'm gonna pull that into my green a bit. I'm gonna dab with my paper towel. I know it's a lot of back and forth, but it's experimenting. Some of these are not gonna look right, and that's fine. You do not have to have this blending challenge here, not even challenge, blending assignment is not supposed to look perfect, okay? Again, I'm a teacher, right? Mine's probably gonna look pretty decent. You're not a teacher. You're a beginner artist here, right? At least some of you are. Some of you maybe are a little more advanced than others, and that's fine. I do not expect perfection here, people. Please do not freak yourself out. If yours looks like trash, that's fine. You're learning. I'm okay with a little bit of trashy looking pieces, okay? Dab off some of that water. Some artists, don't really use their paper towel at all. I use it a lot with my watercolor because I don't like excess water pooling up. Because it kind of ends up doing this. I don't know if you can see that. Makes like a line in some areas if water pools up, and I don't like the look of that, so I tend to clean up any excess water. So I'm moving into the blue now. And I know this video is gonna be pretty long, so just, you can fast forward and pause as you need. Okay, rinsing off my brush a little, dabbing off the excess water because there's already enough water on the paper right now. So I'm just kind of blending a little bit with that blue and the green so it doesn't look so different on the blending spot there. Just take a little more blue before I blend in the violet. Okay, now I'm gonna go for the violet or purple. Just kind of putting it in there. You can do this too. You can just kind of like blob in your color first and then pull it into the color. Sometimes that works, especially if it's like already a lighter color and you're trying to blend in a darker color on top of the lighter color. Definitely gonna want to kind of clean off your brush and then blend the two together so you're not just pulling one darker color all the way on top. So I'm gonna grab a little more blue, and I'm noticing that's a lot of water, so I'm gonna grab my paper towel, dab, 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 dab. And I can like dab off quite a bit of the color because I can always go back in and add a little more. It's never a good idea to leave too much on the paper here. Dab off a little bit, it's a lot of color. There we go. You don't want your paintbrush to be loaded up with water. That's where you run into problems. It's better for your brush to be just a little too dry than a little too wet. Okay. Blending in so it looks nice and smooth. And I'm just gonna, with a clean brush here, just maybe blend a little more with that blue and green. That's fine, we're good. So I'm hoping this all so far is making sense to everybody. Okay, because now we're getting to the choice portion here. Something that I like to do, you could try this. I like to do what's called a wet wash. So I just put water first onto the page here, get it nice and wet, just in this section. I'm gonna do about half of it this way to start. Okay, so I'm just getting water in there. Okay, and then I'm dabbing off my brush. I'm gonna just grab any color here, and I'm gonna just kind of start by adding little bits to it. Might need a little more water there. I don't think I had quite enough. So I'm gonna just kind of dab it in there. And you're gonna notice it's gonna start to spread a little. And if it's not doing a lot, you might need to add a little more water. Oh, and I got too much water there on my paper, so I'm gonna dab some off. Okay, you're gonna notice it's gonna like spread a little, okay? So I'm gonna then grab another warm color, some yellow, and just kind of, I'm literally just like dropping dots of it onto here, okay? You're gonna notice it's gonna start to kind of bleed together a little. You're gonna want the paper to be nice and wet. This is where you wanna be kind of careful because the paper can rip if you have really thin paper. If it's watercolor paper, it won't rip, but yeah, it looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna grab some orange, add a few little dots here and there to blend it together. And then what I like to do sometimes, I'll take my paper towel and I'll just dab, 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 and lighten it up a bit, and then I'll go back in. A little more. A little more yellow as it starts to blend in. Maybe a little orange over here. So it kind of is going to look a little bit like tie-dye. At least to me it does. Okay. We want to just kind of play around with it here. Okay. And you could even over here kind of experiment what happens when you mix colors that are kind of opposite. So like, for example, green and purple. Like I said before, you don't want to mix those two, right? What happens? It actually makes like a black color, depending on how much you add in, like a blackish gray. Okay, so if you look, those two, it makes like a gray color. Okay, and now it's kind of the same thing if you mix like red and green. So I'll start with green again, a little more water, green, red, mixy mixy, you get kind of a brown. So this is a good place in the choice section to just kind of play and test some stuff out, right? I don't care what the choice section looks like. I'm grading these 4, okay? And I'm not grading about how smooth things look. I'm just grading that you tried it and attempted, and you know, whatever it turns out to be is what it ends up as, okay? So once you're done here, you need to take a picture of this, okay, and submit it, and also put a copy in your virtual sketchbook, okay? So hopefully this all made sense to everyone. If you have questions, you can email me, message me, or do whatever you need to do to get a hold of me for help. Okay, I'm just finishing up dabbing right there. All right, everyone, give it a try. Enjoy.